I mean, that could be one of the interesting things about this. When Formula One does start again, we're potentially going to have some pretty, I guess, experimental things going on. We've talked a lot, Laurence and I. We've got a lot of time to kill on, in airport waiting lounges and on drives into the circuits about different things we'd like to see in a weekend. And I think they're going to be forced to shorten these things down. And I mean, there's all sorts of things that have been talked about before. There's obviously the idea of a reverse grid and stuff was talked about, but I don't think they'd go that extreme with it. But it seems more like, one practice session followed by qualifying, and then into the race on the Sunday, which I've always thought is quite a nice idea. I think it helps the smaller teams, that the big teams have less running and less data to kind of feed back to their factories and stuff like that. And we tend to see the less practice there is. It seemed last year that in those weekends where we didn't have too much practice, the races were much better. It was much more unpredictable out in front, and especially with Mercedes, I think when they go into race weekends and they've got less practice, there's a lot more unknowns about them. So hopefully that could be, I don't want to use, it's weird using the phrase silver lining for this whole situation, but from a championship perspective, that might be quite an interesting thing to it when we do finally get racing. But like Laurence said, it's impossible to predict. I mean, Azerbaijan looks like a good bet, but then after that, yeah, like the situation in Europe right now, there could potentially not be a race in Europe, this year. If you look at how the calendar falls, we might not get one until Italy or Belgium, which is after the usual summer break. So, pretty crazy situation. Laurence, if you were, I was gonna throw this into the mix. What one thing would you do to spice a race weekend calendar up if you had the chance to do so?
Well, it's a very good question. I've always been quite a big fan of qualifying races, but I don't think that really helps us in this situation because it's kind of one of those things where you probably need a bit more practice time before rather than less. But I've always quite liked the idea of qualifying races. I figure the racing is usually the most exciting part, but it all depends on the circuit a bit, doesn't it? There's some circuits where qualifying is an absolute thrill to watch, like Monaco, for example, and you wouldn't want to have the qualifying race there. But there's if you can mix it up, and this is something that Lewis Hamilton's been talking about for a while, is that, why do we have the same schedule every race we go to? Why don't we mix it up a bit and play some strengths with certain circuits?
Well, especially when there's 22 races as well, it gets very samey very quickly. So it's a good point.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I think for the 2 race schedule thing, this is something which F1 is willing to try out, because if they can find a way essentially to make triple headers work. We've had triple headers in the past, which we have 3 races in consecutive weekends. And the teams don't like it because moving the freight around is pretty difficult. Mechanics get absolutely knackered working 3-day kind of weekend, well 4-day really, because they start their work on the Thursday very much. In fact, a lot of them arrive on the Wednesday. So they're looking at ways of shortening the weekend, and that could really work. And that will be essential if they're looking at getting 18 races into this year. You're not going to be able to have your standard what we kind of see as a 4-day weekend, which is where we all turn up and do the media on Thursday. There's a full practice day on Friday, there's qualifying day on Saturday, and there's a race on Sunday. Now, when you add Wednesday arriving and setting up, in fact, some races they're kind of Tuesday setting up and packing it all down by the end of Monday. If you can condense that significantly, then all of a sudden the thought of doing 3 back-to-back races, even if they're in quite different parts of the world. So let's say if you did a kind of Vietnam-China one, which is 2 countries fairly close to each other, and then maybe Abu Dhabi. Just speculating here, but looking at the calendar, that's the kind of thing that you may have to consider. Then 2-day race weekends are essential for that. And add to that as well, sometimes the problems with getting freight in and out of certain countries like China through customs and things like that. These are all kind of options that will open up opportunities to get more races at the end of the year. And then the way that F1 looks at it as well, if this is proven to be a success with shorter race weekends, that opens up the idea, or much more palatable idea of having 25 races over a year, which is something that they've actually looked at for some time as a kind of target to try and get more races on the calendar in different places.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube, and for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app, and for premium content plus live streaming, make sure to subscribe to ESPN Player.